Hi, welcome to the Dear Next Gen podcast with your host Cece. Montage has a goal to bridge generational gaps with meaningful connections, fun events, and deep dive conversations. Enjoy this podcast episode, and remember, your younger self will be so proud of you.
Hello and welcome back to the Dear Next Gen podcast. Today I have Emma here and I'm just so happy that we get to connect over video. Emma, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
I find it funny that we have like mutual Instagram friends now, and that's just how small the world is and how God works in really cool ways. So
I know. I totally remember just finding your page and then being like, I have to listen to this podcast. And then the more I listened and the more I dug in, I was like, and she knows this person and that person. And it all just started to connect. And I was like, God is so cool for like linking all of us together. And it just seems like such a big platform. And yet I'm like, I've found my small group of people, which is just really
cool. That is definitely something we need to talk about because it is a huge platform, obviously, but just the way maybe the algorithm works or just the way that the world works is that we will probably run into similar people, or you'll see somebody tag someone that they know. And same with you. I saw your content when you followed us, and I was just so excited to get to be part of watching you grow your brand, your ministry, and just your business. And there's so much we need to dive into, but I'm going to start with a question that we ask everybody. What advice would you give your high school or your younger self?
Oh, this is such a good question. And the way I tossed and turned over this question, because there are a trillion things I would tell my high school self. But I think what just keeps coming back to the forefront of my mind is biblical, and it's from Matthew 6:33. And it's this concept of seek the kingdom first and everything else will be added. And for my life, especially in high school, I think you're told prioritize your relationship with Jesus, study the word, grow in your faith. And it was definitely a priority for me, but it was more of a part of my life than instead of like an actual foundation for my life. And I think now that I'm post-college age, young 20s, I'm really understanding the difference that it makes to have Christ as your foundation, because it really just is an umbrella to everything else in your life, whether that's relationships or self-confidence, self-love, your career, like everything stems from that. So I would just encourage my high school self to really dig into that further and to be like, look for Jesus in all the little ways you possibly can and all the big grand scheme things you possibly can.
Wow, that's so good. And for context, you have a ministry, you've done entrepreneurship as a virtual assistant. I like to skip a lot of the surface level things because I know people can go stalk you. They can go listen to other episodes with our friends that they can get to know you a little bit on that side. But I want to really dive into, this idea of you growing up and realizing you've heard what you were supposed to do, read the Bible, be close to Jesus, but it didn't really hit you until a little bit later. Maybe let people know, where do you live and what was your childhood kind of like?
So I live in Southern California. I grew up in Southern California. I was actually born in Ecuador, funny enough, and my parents were missionaries in Ecuador.
Cool.
So I have grown up in a Christian family my whole life, and I have honestly had the most blessed childhood. Like, I love my family. I think God really showed his goodness to me in so many different ways growing up. I would say, like, to a certain degree, it was sheltered just because my parents are naturally more protective and whatnot. But I went to public school, which I absolutely loved. But because of that, like, you have a duality with life at that point, right? Because you're going to church and you're being taught by your parents one thing, and then you go to school and it is like the opposite of what
so different.
Your faith community talks about, right? Exactly. And so it was just kind of a constant back and forth and a struggle for me to really find, like, where am I getting my worth from? Where are my priorities? And really kind of deciphering, like, what is society kind of telling me to be versus, like, what do I know God is telling me to be, right? And so all in all, it was great. But I think for someone that has self-worth struggles, it just became a lot as I got older. And I didn't really have a handle on how deep it went until I was honestly like in college, in the thick of it, trying to figure out who the heck I was at that point.
Yeah. When you were in college and like later in high school, do you find that because you danced, that's one thing. I feel like a lot in the dance community, you are, you're thinking about what you look like externally, you're performing, you have that side of you, and then you're in an area where you go to public school, not everybody's a Christian. How did you find like in those two communities you were able to just share what you value or just not be shy to have a completely kind of different set of mind views and morals or find other Christians, because your entire ministry is being very vulnerable and just explicitly sharing what Jesus has done. And if this is new to you and you're just listening to this, you can dive deeper into what that looks like for you and what you believe and how it affected our lives. Maybe could relate to what whoever's listening can think. But yeah, how did you get to a place where you're confident enough to talk about these things?
Strangely enough, I think, and I totally think this is a God thing, but I have an easier time talking about Jesus, I feel like, with people that don't believe in Jesus. And which is pretty funny because I don't feel like that's the common theme, but I feel as though my approach to whether it be a dance community or whether it be like a public school community is I'm a good listener, I think, and I like to hear people's stories. And so the way I approach ministry is a lot about just like hearing what you have to say versus focusing on like what I have to say. And often enough, I felt like the more you relate to someone, the more trust there is and the more they're willing to kind of hear what you have to say as well, right?
Yeah,
So
that's good.
I just feel like at the end of the day, it's so important for other people to know, especially people that don't share the same beliefs as I do. Like, just because I believe in Jesus, like, that doesn't mean I have everything figured out. It doesn't mean I don't struggle, that I don't have like my own weaknesses and pain points. And I think once people realize you're not sitting on a high horse thinking you're better than them, like they're willing to talk to you about like their worldviews and their beliefs, even if they are different, like it just becomes an open conversation. And so my parents were also just firm believers of like, if we're Christians and we're called to be lights in the world, then we need to go to the quote unquote like darker places, right? Like we can't all stay in one place. We can't all stay just in the church. Like you're supposed to go out and meet people that share different beliefs than you do. So I think I just really had that instilled to me growing up and have found a way to do it where it feels comfortable for me because I'm not an extrovert. I'm pretty quiet. I'm pretty shy, but I've noticed that I feel like with God-given abilities of just listening and liking to story tell and hear other people's stories, like that was a new avenue I found to really like connect with people and share Jesus that way.
Yeah, you definitely do a really incredible, relatable job with your platforms on, being somebody who is a role model and who is going through their own walk with God, but then also saying like, hey, I used to feel this, or maybe I'm just not feeling, as confident as I used to be, or here's some reminders of where you can find your worth. So thank you for just being a light on social media, because it can be a very dark place. And I think as Christians, it's hard to want to use your platform for that when you can just think, oh, other people are doing that. So did you ever have a moment where you're like, oh, maybe I don't need to launch this or post this or put in all this time into something I'm passionate about because somebody else will maybe do it?
What's interesting there is I know you referenced this earlier, is that I started an online business. I started the whole online entrepreneurship journey really with not an intent to make any kind of online ministry at that point. Like I was just new to this female hustle grind and I was like, that looks fun. Like I want to jump on that. And it really wasn't until like 2 years into it where like that shift began to change. And if I'm being like completely honest with you, like Christian creators in this space, like I love a lot of them and I don't want this to sound bad, but I also have trouble with some of them, just because I feel like there's often this like facade that Christian creators don't struggle and that they don't have the same weaknesses, pain points as just anybody else does. And so I was like, I only want to create a ministry platform if I'm able to like be honest and if I'm able to like bring my own story to the table, because my job wouldn't be to like make people feel like they're not doing a good enough job in their faith or as a believer. And I was like, I merely just want what I feel like maybe I could have used when I was younger, like just a companion to come alongside me and be like, I'm a believer too, but hey, I also struggle with XYZ, and that doesn't make you any less loved by Jesus, you know? And so I didn't feel like I was, you know, doing any groundbreaking work per se of like having this new revelation and share Jesus online. But I just feel like the way in which God planted the idea in my brain was kind of with a refreshed perspective of like, you're going to share Jesus, but I'm also calling you to be very vulnerable about like what you go through. And that is how you're going to make an impact. And that is how you're going to talk to my people.
Wow. That's very intentional. And it's so true because it can almost do the opposite effect of the intention. And I've been there as a person who's like trying to be, you know, intentional and then realizing I'm sharing a facade. And I've also seen that where I have watched people's content and they're meant to inspire me, meant to share the gospel, but then I feel worse because in the end I'm just seeing the highlight reel that a lot of us share online. So it is really cool that God specifically chose you to say, hey, you're going to be vulnerable and you're going to do this in a space that's not always vulnerable, and you're going to do this with the hope of Jesus in it, which is also very different because social media can be so much complaining. And I think that is when I know I need to take a break, when I'm consuming a lot of complaints or I'm consuming a lot of picture perfect looking situations without the reality. And it's hard in the creator space. I have heard a lot of creators be vulnerable and say, hey, things are not always as good as it seems. But if I'm not seeing that very often or really ever, just so you know, the occasional story of, you know, life is happening behind the scenes you guys don't see, it is hard to actually know and remember that, if that makes sense, or you resonate with that, because that's how I feel.
Oh yeah, totally. I feel like I know I'm supposed to be encouraged by a lot of the videos I see, and to a certain degree I am, right? And I feel a certain sense of inspiration to like get on that Bible like reading routine grind and to like be in prayer more often. And I never doubt for a single second that those like intentions aren't good, right? Like I know they're aiming to do like the Lord's work, and I 1000% respect that. But there is sometimes that following feeling of like, I'm not doing that though. And so now I feel like not as great about where I'm at anymore. So I think that's just, you know, a nature to social media, because you do just see a highlight reel and only like a snippet of people's lives, right? In their entirety. Yeah. And so you kind of have to go in already with that mindset of like, I know I'm not seeing the whole picture, but doing what you can, I think, to share, you know, the good stuff, but also in the same way, like sharing the very much real stuff and not necessarily like airing out everything online. But, you know,
that's good advice too. Just
maybe don't do that, but
there's a lot of like balance that needs to happen with that, because you don't want to be airing out everything, and you also want to, you know, decide what's private and what's not. But there are also ways to, like, depending on even what your platform is like, I think this relates to people who aren't trying to create content for a large public either. Even if you have a private Instagram and it's only people that you know, I think there's also ways for you to share in a, you know, with discretion what you're actually going through, or to invite people into what you're doing. I've actually seen some people in our community just post similar stuff to you, but even on their private, like they have a private account and they'll ask like, hey, what can I pray for you today? Little question box, and like nothing will be shared. I just want to know how you're doing, or, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your day? And I think those are really good ways to use social media to connect. And you use social media to connect. That's how we've connected. But also you do that even like for work, you connect and you engage with people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think social media connection is just a huge part of my life. And so when I started the whole online business, I was doing like primarily social media services, and that turned into doing a lot of PR work, which means you're essentially just talking to people all
Yeah.
day, every day. And a big part of my job is I essentially work on different companies like in their teams. So I impersonate like different brand voices like constantly throughout the day, which is very fun, but it is very
Yeah.
exhausting to a certain degree. But I think something that's just stood out to me is I just realized the big impact the simple stuff can have when you're connecting with people online. So kind of like those prayer boxes, or just like doing a check-in, do you need a pep talk, like how is your day going, like
Yeah.
questions like that. Just they always get the highest engagement, they always get like the most feedback, the most love, whatever it is. Like people crave those kind of check-ins, because I think a lot of the time we just assume people get those and they don't. And so
Yeah.
if you just can play a small part in like posting a little story, like it makes a huge difference. And so
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, God has just given like an emphasis on connection in my life for some reason. And I just think it's a cool way in this day and age that we get to talk to people from all over the world. So why not take advantage of that? Doesn't mean you have to do anything fancy. It just means, why don't you just ask someone how your day's going? And then it just
Yeah.
is really cool to see like what God can bring from just like those simple questions too.
Do you have any advice, or anybody listening who feels inspired to do that or has tried that and, maybe feels defeated by a lack of response or just kind of not knowing what to do? Because I've definitely been in that place. And then the way that I, dealt with that was, you know what, I'm just gonna never act like nobody is answering. If for some reason it's just, a busy sunny day and I'm like, who needs prayer, and only one person responds, and, that's just the nature of the day and I need to not give up. But yeah, have you ever had those, or have advice for somebody who's on the edge now, ready to decide how they'll continue?
Oh, totally. I think, and that's me too. Like, I'm going to say that. Like, I get sometimes zero responses from people, and that is totally in 1000% fine. I think for me, a way that I like to almost monitor or maybe check myself is a better way to put it, is before I post stuff like that, I like ask myself what the motive is there. Like, is my motive to get a response? Sure. Like, I'd love to pray for somebody. But at the end of the day, like, if I don't have anybody respond, am I going to feel lesser than? Am I going to feel defeated? And I kind of remind myself, like, whether or not people take advantage of the like opportunity you're giving them to share, that's their choice, right? But the comforting thing is that you are keeping an open space, because you could have people like watching your page, watching your stories, watching your posts, whatever, and see it time and time again and just never say anything directly to you, but you have no idea what they could be thinking internally or what you reminded them of internally, right? And maybe one day, just one day, they'll come back and be like, I noticed you asked for prayer requests, so I'm walking through XYZ and I just thought I'd share with you here. Like, you just never know how long it takes.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. So I would just encourage you to keep doing it, because at the end of the day, like, if you really want to pray over people, be a comforting space for people, then it's just about keeping the doors open. Whether or not people choose to walk in, like, that's their choice. But I think you should be proud of yourself for, keeping that space wide open to people that want it. So.
Emma, you just give such good advice on the spot, and you could tell that it comes from you living it out. I love it.
Thank you.
I had another question that came up to my mind, because we're just talking about connection and social media, and I have a feeling a lot of people who are going to listen to this are people in our community who need that extra step of just a little push of like, go, like, be you online, like, do what you feel you're called to say and do. And there's maybe a lack of that type of content. I would say just easily accessible or like known, because a lot of what we see and get fed is, just different cultural things. But do you ever think about just how to be in the world but not of the world on social media? That is something that I'm very passionate about, but I do in a more like discreet, I'm figuring it out kind of way. But I do remember being younger and, like you said, check yourself before you're going to post something or share something. What's the motive? There are times where my motive was not, to be honest, what God probably wanted me to do. I'm like, at the gym, at a dance class, doing this. And I'm literally just posting because I saw somebody else post something that looks great. And I'm like, ooh, like so many comments, likes, and like everybody's encouraging her and I feel ugly. So I'm just going to post this to, you know what I mean? Like you find that photo, you look really great, or you just stage it all for that. Yeah, definitely. I've been there. You've been there. It's so real. And I don't think we talk about it enough because we just want it to seem like an effortless post. But yeah, how do you navigate like, okay, what am I posting and why? Who is seeing this and what? And just like, yeah, how do you personally go about that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I feel like that is, the facade is that everything is effortless for people online when we all know we're having deep conversations with ourselves about should I post this picture and what is the caption and how many people are going to comment?
What's the order of the carousel?
Right, because it matters. And I just feel like that's so normal. So first, I just want to say, like, anyone that does that, like, please know you're in great company across the board. And like, if you ever just want to post something because you like think you look good, like, go off. You should post something that you think you look good in, right? And that's not a bad thing at all. I just think too, like with what you were saying about, trying to kind of balance the motives and what you're really trying to message to people, that can be a rabbit hole a little bit. So I would keep it very simple, like oftentimes I think maybe it's even like a gut instinct, like before you post something, like, do you know you're doing this because you saw somebody else do it and therefore this is just a way for you to compare them, like, like what you're doing to them?
Yeah.
Or are you doing it because you generally feel like I look great, like no matter what people say, I'm like I just want to share this.
I love this photo. I love this memory. Let's go.
And I think like we know in our guts like why we're sharing something. So maybe even just a good question to ask yourself is like, if nobody were to respond, would I still keep this on my page? Right? I feel like when I was younger, I'd post something and if nobody liked it, I'd delete it because I feel like that's nobody liked it.
Yeah.
But looking back, I'm like, who cares? Like being yourself online, I think is just such a thing to practice because everyone has almost a curated image of like what they are in the online space. And so I mean like me included, right? Like I'm nobody I think is really above that. But I think a way to kind of balance it is asking yourself those questions before, but then also just like don't think about it too much because you'll
keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Like maybe it's not easy, but it is simple, and I think that's just something you're not taught to do, especially in today's day and age when everything is set up perfectly and published and curated and all that stuff. So I just that on. And if you pray
that's
about
so
it,
good.
It helps.
Yeah, that's so true because if you're already questioning and your gut's kind of telling you like, oh, I'm not doing this for the right reasons, shut it down fast and then find it. Yeah, then it's probably not. Like if you have to rethink about it multiple times, it's a probably not, not kind of thing. And if you need accountability, find a friend that you trust who will be really honest and like, hearing you out if you need that too. And or, you can message us your photos and we'll tell you look awesome.
I love doing that.
Just send it to me and I'll tell you like how great you look and we'll talk about it. And I just appreciate how vulnerable you were with us today and just all you're doing in your space. I think we could talk about this for so long and I'm just grateful that some people are willing to talk about this. And I know that our community can go look at the different things that you're doing and follow along on the different conversations you're having with people and the resources you're sharing. And I also want to say you're a very good writer / interviewee. I was like reading, I always read your posts, but I appreciate how you communicate the things that you're going through and how you're encouraging people. So I think that's a gift that God has given you and we get to reap some of that in the Montage community. So thanks so much, Emma.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I love what you're doing and I love the conversations you have. And I think you're doing exactly what you're setting out to do is you're impacting generations to come. And we're really just giving the help I think we could have used as little girls. And I just love a full circle moment like that. So
it's very full circle. I think that's why everybody has advice they can give because I've run into people and been like, oh, you should be on my podcast one day. And they're like, I have nothing to say. I'm like, well, do you have advice for younger you? They're like, oh, yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
Like, actually, yeah, I have lots of things.
Right. Which makes it so great, because everything connects to everything. And I feel like everyone can always take away something from these conversations, which just how fun.
We love that. And it doesn't mean that everybody listening won't make any of the same mistakes we made. It just means maybe you'll be a little bit more equipped than us.
Right. Here's the tools we could have used back then.
Yeah, maybe your social media will be a little less cringe than mine was back in the day.
Although I will say, I'm grateful for the humbling experience that it gave me.
Yeah, I can actually see my first post. Like, I go really far back. Like,
yeah,
it's still there. It's questionable with the filters and all. Like,
humble beginnings, everybody.
Humble beginnings, the darker corners. Teens love to like wipe their whole social media clean and like restart. And I'm always like, why do you do that? I love those photos.
I know. I do the same thing. I'm like, I'm never gonna delete anything. Like, Instagram is really like a scrapbook of my whole life, and I want to see the cringy moments. Like, that's just part of how we grew up.
Go back and see exactly. Like, look at how far she's come.
Right. It's really to appreciate the progress since then.
Yeah, this is a progress photo. Tell us, Emma, where we can find you on social media and all that.
You can find me on Instagram at it's Emma Fabros, and then you can find me on my website on becauseshe'swhole.com, and I have like a free little journal for you guys on there that you can download, and you can join my email list on there for just monthly encouragements and little updates about BSW and all of that good stuff. But please come say hi. I love just meeting new friends on there.
Yeah, I can vouch that Emma loves meeting new friends, and her community is very, very welcoming. And your website and photos are also just very beautiful, and I just enjoy looking at and reading the stuff. So I'm sure everybody else will too.
Thank you. It's been so fun chatting with you, and I'm so blessed to be able to just be in people's ears and share all of the things.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back again. I feel like we could do a whole part 2 on like different social media and engagement, and also your engaged things.
Oh yeah, that too.
Oh yeah, and that too. So follow along for the content if you want, because she's whole content, and if you also want to see the pre-wedding content.
I'm giving it all out there. It's the best of both worlds. So I would love
so congratulations from our team to you.
Thank you. It means a lot.
Show us your ring.
It looks like this. You did such a good job.
Oh yeah. Did you know? What the ring was going to be?
Oh.
Both ring and that was going to happen.
I suspected the proposal was going to happen, but I wasn't like 1000% sure. So my motto was like, Emma, be prepared, but not expectant, because you don't want to be disappointed and then have that be a situation. And so then for the actual ring, I don't know anything about rings. I'm not really a jewelry person, but I had like a Pinterest board, as we all do. And I just texted him photos and was like, I trust you. This is kind of the vision. And he like perfectly mimicked everything.
Did amazing.
He did amazing. So props to him for listening and just going above and beyond as always. So.
Yeah. And the proposal, you didn't know?
I didn't know. It was the day before my birthday. And he had like told me to get my nails done. And so that was like the big flag for me of like, maybe it's happening. But then I was also like, maybe he's just being kind because it's my birthday weekend and he wants me to pamper myself. Anyway, he played it really good with the timing because it was throwing me off. But I didn't know until like an hour before. And I was like, oh, it's for sure happening.
An hour before, you're like, right now. Did he act any different during that like hour when you kind of knew? Or
well, he didn't act any different like throughout the whole day. And the only reason I knew kind of the hour before was like we were driving home from dinner and he was going like 20 miles an hour and he kept like talking to his like friend, his roommate on his phone, which he usually just like doesn't answer text messages right away.
Yeah.
So I was like, where are we going? Like home is the other way. And we're driving to the beach and you just happen to suggest to go out for a walk. Like
yeah.
All the little things just started coming together.
You're like, oh, this is it.
I know.
Did you feel like out of body experience when it happened, or were you just like, oh?
Absolutely. I was telling myself like, Emma, stay present, because I mean, you black out. Like, I don't remember what he
Yes.
said at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was
I knew I was
lovely,
getting
but I don't
proposed to, and I blacked out a bit. I had to look at the photos.
right, I was like, "What exactly happened?" It's all a blur. So, I definitely was, like, really excited. I cried, but looking back, I couldn't tell you anything that really
Yeah.
happened during that hour.
You have
But
the
it was definitely
pictures.
there, so
Yeah. You can look back on it and it'll tell you more.
Right, I'd be like, "So
Aw.
what was my reaction? Like, tell me, how did I"
Yeah. I also think people's reactions are never what they expect it to be. Like growing up, you're like, oh, when I get proposed to, I'm gonna cry or I'm gonna say the right words. And then you get to it and
Right,
you're like,
I know. I was just in tears and I had no words besides,
you're
"Thank
like,
you, I love you."
thank you. Thank
I
you.
just said thank
Yes.
you so many times.
But
That's my
you're
best
grateful.
message. Right. I'm just a
Yeah,
grateful
being
heart.
grateful is good. Yeah. You went all this way to, find the ring, set it all up.
Right,
Thank you.
right. There was effort, I just needed to know it was all appreciated.
Yeah, I've seen videos of people who will say like no way, but it sounds like they're saying no at first, and they're
Right.
just like so shocked that they don't know what to say.
No, I've seen that and people that just don't say anything for the longest time and just, like, cry, and I'm
Oh,
like, "I think he needs an answer," you know?
I think he's concerned. I think he's gonna say something. I thought it would cry, but it was literally just like so much like all of a sudden adrenaline that I was like, oh my goodness, like it's
No,
happening. Like
happened.
this is it.
Right. I think the weirdest shift is going from, like, what if and, like, what is it going to look like to be like, it happened, like, this is what it was. Like, that,
Yes.
because you think about it for most of your life and then to have, like, an anecdote for
Hmm.
what really happened is like, that's crazy because now that's in the
That's
past,
crazy.
you know?
Yeah, that's in the past. It's fun and crazy, and yeah, maybe we'll have to do like a pre-wedding or post-wedding chat too.
That would
Talk
be
about
fun.
it.
I'm game for all of it.
Talk about dating and all that. Have a
Yeah, that
good
sounds
rest of your day, Emma. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.